Gon' vote. Everybody gon' vote. Everybody gon' vote. Everybody gon' vote. Comrade! Labor right, them a go down, bong. Them a go down, bong. Them a go down. Is that? Margie, him a God picking. No hope their work if you touch Margie. Margie, him a God picking. No hope their work if you touch Margie. We now vote for Labour. Orange we a come out in now. If you love the PNP, who no step out for Marky G. Jamaica just come along with we. People time come, people time come, people time is up.
Only thing that's on my mind is who's gonna run this town tonight.
Yeah, I say that we are. Pledge your allegiance.
Who's gonna run this town tonight?
Yeah, I say that we are.
We gonna run this town.
Make the trumpets play. Make the trumpets play.
Of an investigation concerning irregularities in relation to construction of a residential development at 2 Waycliffe Close, that's in Beverly Hills, Kingston 6, contrary to the terms of the building permit issued to a company called Estate Bridge Holdings by the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation. So the report says it was started following receipt of a report alleging irregularities in the development and building approval processes relating to property owned by Dr. Andrew Holness. However, initial inquiries led the investigation to focus on a residential development located at 2 Waycliffe Close in Beverly Hills, which is owned by a company called Estate Bridge. The investigation found that the development was being constructed contrary to the terms of the planning approval and building permit issued by the Kingston and St. Andrew Municipal Corporation, the KCMC, and the Building Act. While planning approval and the building permit were issued for the construction of 4 semi-detached townhouses in 2 two-story buildings consisting of 2-bedroom units. At the commencement of the investigation, the erected development consisted of 4 four-bedroom units. So, in other words, the permit was for 4 units to be constructed. Each unit would have 2 bedrooms. The director is saying that when this investigation started, the development was being done with units that had 4 bedrooms instead of 2. The director concludes that the breaches were deliberate and that the directors of Estate Bridge are liable. The director also concludes that KCMC failed to effectively discharge their responsibilities to ensure compliance with the terms of the approvals granted, and recommendations have been made. So just a little bit of background, and the first thing, I see people asking, what does this have to do with the Integrity Commission? Well, in the report section on jurisdiction, it says that sections 33 and 51 of the Integrity Commission Act empower the Director of Investigations to investigate irregularities around prescribed licenses. So that is what gives the Director the power under law to look into this issue. On July 10, 2024, the following allegations were received: that Mr. Holness is the owner of property on which construction is being carried out contrary to the terms of the planning approval and building permit granted by the KCMC. The allegation went on to say that Mr. Holness often requests a service from his architect to draw a blueprint that will be sent to KCMC, but a second blueprint will be drawn to be used for the actual construction, and the allegation was that this was being done at one of his developments in Beverly Hills / Cherry Garden. On July 11, 2024, the director undertook an unannounced visit to KSAMC to inquire as to whether Dr. Holness had directly or indirectly applied for a building permit for development in Beverly Hills/Cherry Gardens. Inquiries revealed that the only development in this area that Dr. Holness was in some way connected with is a residential development at 2 Waycliffe Close, and that this was owned by a company called Estate Bridge. And he mentioned some specific people who are pertinent to the investigation. Xavier Chevans, Chief Engineering Officer at KSAMC, Roshane Hamilton, Field Officer, Orion Brown and Sean Martin, Field Officer, Kenado Nesbeth, KNN Designs and Consultants, Norman Brown, Sigia Anderson and Adam Holness, who are directors and shareholders of Estate Bridge, Donovan Williams, the company secretary of Estate Bridge, and Dr. Holness, the legal and beneficial owner of a company called Imperium Investments, which is a former shareholder of Estate Bridge. And the director says what the investigation sought to establish was the following: whether there exists any development in Beverly Hills/Cherry Gardens that was or were connected to Dr. Holness, and if so, whether the requisite approvals were obtained for their construction, whether the terms and conditions of any approvals and or permits issued had been adhered to, whether there were any breaches of the Building Act, the Town and Country Planning Act, the Integrity Commission Act, and any other relevant legislation, and whether recommendations ought to be made in relation to the subject. So the report speaks of the process of investigation, how many statements were taken, and so on. The director says inquiries of the KSAMC reveal that the only development in Beverly Hills/Cherry Gardens that Dr. Holness was in some way connected with is 2 Waycliffe Close. This was owned by Estate Bridge. The directors of Estate Bridge were Sigia Anderson, Norman Brown, Adam Holness. The shareholders, Sigia Anderson, Norman Brown, Imperium had held 5,001 ordinary shares when the company was incorporated, surrendered 1,000 of those on the 28th of January 2021, and then surrendered the other 4,001 shares on the 20th of October 2022. Adam Holness, also a shareholder. The director says one of the company's shareholders, Imperium, is familiar because of a recently concluded investigation into the statutory declarations of Dr. Holness. So Dr. Holness was asked about Imperium, and he said Imperium is a company in which he was sole director and shareholder. In 2020, he wound up a company called ADMAT Incorporated, which is incorporated in St. Lucia, in which he and his sons were shareholders and directors, and the assets from ADMAT were transferred to Imperium. Dr. Holness had also said in a letter to the Integrity Commission that the company called Estate Bridge had entered into a land development agreement to develop property owned by ADMAT at 2 Waycliffe Close. The principals of ADMAT intended to wind up the company and transfer its business to a locally registered company. And in anticipation of that winding up process, ADMAT liquidated and or transferred its assets to Imperium, except for 2 Waycliffe Close, which it was considered more economical to transfer directly to Estate Bridge, since that was the entity that would develop the land and ultimately subdivide and sell the units. This is information that came from Dr. Holness. The property at 2 Waycliffe Close was therefore, Dr. Holness said, transferred to Estate Bridge free and clear. Imperium and Adam Holness held shares in Estate Bridge to secure interest in 2 Waycliffe Close, which was then the main asset of Estate Bridge. The director therefore established that Dr. Holness is connected to the development at 2 Waycliffe Close by virtue of ADMAT Incorporated, of which Dr. Holness and his sons were shareholders and directors, having initially owned the land that was developed. and in relation to his roles as sole director, shareholder, and beneficial owner of Imperium, which had shares in Estate Bridge at the time that the planning and/or building permit was issued to them on July 12, 2021. While the director notes that Imperium surrendered its shares in Estate Bridge on October 20, 2022, the director considers it highly likely that the development at 2 Waycliffe Close is the subject of the allegations, meaning the allegations that set off this particular investigation that went into his office. So therefore, inquiries were made into this particular development. The report then goes through the law in relation to the building and planning approval process. On July 12, 2021, the KSAMC granted planning and building permission to the applicant Estate Bridge to erect a multi-family development, and that was going to be made up of 4 townhouses. The approvals were for 4 units to consist of 2 bedrooms, living, dining, kitchen, swimming pool, multi-purpose area, laundry, and other spaces. Now, the director investigated the development, and he says he executed a warrant on July 12, 2024. During the course of the inspection, the layout of the units was checked against the building permit that had been granted to Estate Bridge. The director found that the development was constructed as 4 townhouses, but that there were significant deviations in the construction of the townhouses when juxtaposed with the building plan that had been approved by the KSAMC. And the following deviations were observed: an additional concrete partition wall constructed in the area labeled laundry, 2 additional concrete partition walls constructed, resulting